Welcome to the Midnight Ledger, Bite Size. 6 short original horror stories told by firelight, part of the Campfire Tales collection from
The Witness Ledger.
Tonight, we have 6 stories drawn from the shadows of night shift workers. Come closer. The fire's warm, and the night is waiting. Story 1, Ward 7. There are things you accept when you work nights in a hospital. The quiet that isn't really quiet, the low hum of machines, the occasional murmur from a room, the sound of the building breathing around you, the way time moves differently after midnight, slower and thicker, like walking through water. The things you see in the faces of patients who are very close to the end, the way they look past you sometimes, at something behind you with an expression that isn't fear. You accept all of it. You have to, or you find another job. I've been a night nurse for 11 years. I've worked in 4 hospitals. I thought I'd seen everything the night shift had to offer. Ward 7 was a general medical ward. 12 beds, mostly elderly patients. The kind of ward where the work is steady and the nights are long and you learn to find comfort in routine. I'd been on that ward for about 8 months when it started. The first thing I noticed was the call light, bed 11. It would activate between 2 and 3 in the morning, reliably, 2 or 3 times a week. I'd go to the room, an elderly man named Arthur, who slept deeply and didn't, as far as I could tell, ever wake in the night, and the light would be on, and Arthur would be asleep, and the call button would be in its holder on the rail, unpressed. I logged it as a fault. Maintenance checked the system twice and found nothing wrong. After the 3rd week, I stopped logging it. I just went to the room, checked on Arthur, turned off the light, and left. The second thing happened about a month in. I was doing my 2 o'clock round, checking on each patient, making notes. The quiet work of the night, and I came to the end of the ward where the corridor turns toward the fire exit. The fire exit has a small window in the door, and the corridor beyond it is lit by a single emergency light, a dim red glow. There was someone standing in the corridor, not a patient. The figure was standing upright, still, in a way that patients rarely manage at 2 in the morning, not a colleague. I was the only staff member on that end of the ward. I could see the outline clearly through the window, a person standing about 10 meters away, facing me. I pushed open the fire door. The corridor was empty. The emergency light hummed. The exit at the far end was closed and alarmed. I told myself it was a reflection. The window in the fire door, the angle of the light. I told myself this with some conviction and went back to my round. I told myself this for about 3 weeks until the night I saw the figure again, and it raised one hand, slowly, deliberately, the way you wave at someone you recognize. I did not push open the door that time. The third thing, the thing that made me finally request the transfer, happened on Arthur's last night. He passed away quietly, as he had done everything, at around 4 in the morning. Natural causes, entirely expected. I was with him at the end, and then I went to do what needs to be done in those moments. The paperwork, the calls, the careful, necessary process of it. When I came back to the room to prepare it, the call light for bed 11 was on. Arthur's call button was in his hand. I have no explanation for that. His hands had been at his sides. I'd been in the room 20 minutes earlier. I put the button back in its holder. I finished my shift. I put in for the transfer the next morning. I still don't know who was in that corridor. I still don't know what activated the call light all those nights. But I think sometimes that whatever was standing in that corridor wasn't there for me. I think it was waiting for Arthur. And I think on that last night, when he finally pressed the button himself, it came. Story 2. The inventory. I want to tell you about the sound first, because the sound is what started it. And if I start with what I found at the end, you'll lose the texture of how that night actually felt. The slow accumulation of it. The way each thing built on the last. Until, by the end, I was standing in the middle of a warehouse at 3 a.m. and I was absolutely, completely certain that I was not alone. The warehouse is a distribution center, industrial estate, edge of town, the kind of place that exists in a nowhere between the motorway and a retail park. During the day, it's noisy and brightly lit and full of people with clipboards and forklifts and the efficient banality of logistics. I'd worked there 3 years. I knew every corner of it. The overnight inventory was a quarterly job. 1 person, a full count, 8 in the evening to 6 in the morning. I'd done it twice before without incident. I locked the main doors behind me at 8:15 and started at the north end, which is the method. Work south, finish at the loading bay, call it done. The first sound came at around 11. A warehouse is never fully silent. Metal expands and contracts, pallets settle, the ventilation system ticks and hums. I knew all of it, catalogued all of it, could have told you which sounds belonged to which part of the building. This sound didn't belong. It was rhythmic, slow, the sound of footsteps on the concrete floor, not directly, but at a remove, from somewhere in the high shelving on the east side, the section I hadn't reached yet. Deliberate and unhurried. Not the random settling of a structure, but a pattern. Step, pause, step. I stopped walking. The sound stopped. I started again. After a moment, the sound started again. I told myself a bird had got in, or a fox. It happened occasionally, through the loading bay vents. Something that moved when I moved, startled by my footsteps, mirroring them. I went to the east side. I walked every aisle with my torch. Nothing. I went back to work. The sound came back with me. By 1 a.m, I had stopped trying to explain it and had simply accepted it as a companion. Unnerving, inexplicable, but seemingly content to follow at a distance. I kept my pace steady. I kept counting. I was more than halfway through and I was not going to leave an incomplete inventory. At 2:30, I found the shelf. It was in section G7, about 2/3 of the way up, accessible only by the rolling ladder on that aisle. A standard shelf loaded with boxed product. Printer cartridges, as it happened. I'd counted them on the 2 previous inventories. I knew what should be there. The boxes had been rearranged, not disturbed, not knocked about, rearranged, carefully, deliberately, into a shape, a pattern, an arrangement that couldn't have happened by accident or settling, or the slow drift of poorly stacked boxes. They formed letters, 2 of them, rough but legible, the kind of letters a child might make with building blocks. Hi. I stood at the bottom of the ladder for a very long time. The footstep sound had stopped. The warehouse was absolutely, completely silent. I finished the inventory. I don't know how. Professional habit, I think. the part of you that keeps functioning when the rest of you has quietly come apart. I have never done an overnight shift there since. I've thought about those 2 letters more times than I can count. Thought about what it means that whatever was in that warehouse, whatever had been walking the aisles alongside me for hours, had taken the time to say hello. I find it more frightening, not less, that it was friendly. Something that wants you to know it's there is not the same as something that wants to be found. Story 3. Room 14. Security work teaches you a particular relationship with empty buildings. You learn that empty isn't the same as still. Buildings without people in them are not at rest. They settle and shift and make their adjustments in the dark, and you learn to read the sounds the way a sailor reads weather. After a while, you stop flinching. After a while, you know the difference between the noise of a building talking to itself and the noise of something else. I thought I knew the difference. The Marlowe Hotel had been closed since February. A full renovation, 18 months scheduled. The kind of gutting that turns an old building into something new while keeping the bones. My job was straightforward. 1 overnight guard, 8 in the evening to 7 in the morning, walked the floors on a 2-hour rotation, log anything unusual. The hotel had 4 floors and 42 rooms. Most of them were stripped to the walls. No furniture, no fittings, bare plaster and exposed wiring and the ghosts of wallpaper patterns you could still see if the light hit at the right angle. It was the kind of building that felt haunted, not by anything specific but by accumulated time, by the sheer density of all the lives that had moved through it. I did my first walk at 10. Nothing. My second at midnight. Nothing. At 2 in the morning, I was on the 2nd floor when I noticed the light. Room 14 was at the end of the corridor. Like all the rooms, it should have been dark. The renovation team had disconnected the lighting circuits on this floor weeks ago. There were no working fixtures. I knew this because I had done the walk a dozen times and had never seen a light on this floor. There was a light under the door of room 14. Faint. Warm. The particular quality of lamplight rather than anything electrical. A softness to it. A slight flicker. I stood in the corridor and looked at it for a moment. Then I did my job. I went to the door. I knocked. Protocol. Always knock. And then I opened it. The room was furnished. That was the first thing. A fully furnished room. A double bed with the covers turned down. A bedside table with a lamp on it. The lamp that was producing the light. A real lamp. Plugged into a socket that shouldn't have been live. A wardrobe. A chair with a jacket over the back. A glass of water on the bedside table. A glass of water with condensation on the outside. Cold water. Recently poured. I stood in the doorway of that room, and I took it all in, and I tried to assemble an explanation. Squatters, perhaps. Someone who had found a way in, who had set themselves up in the one room on a disconnected floor that somehow still had power. The renovation team had left equipment behind. Perhaps the furnishings were props or samples for the redesign. Perhaps the glass of water had been there for days and the condensation was something else. Perhaps. I called it in. I waited. My supervisor arrived within 20 minutes and we went back to the room together. It was empty, stripped to the walls like all the others. No furniture, no lamp, no jacket, no glass of water. The socket on the wall was a dead fitting disconnected, painted over. My supervisor looked at me for a long time. I finished my shift. I went home. I slept badly. I went back the next evening because I needed to know, and because the not knowing was worse than anything the hotel had shown me. I walked the second floor at 2 in the morning. There was no light under the door of room 14, but when I put my hand flat against the wood, I don't know why I did this. Instinct, perhaps. It was warm, not the ambient warmth of a building. Warm the way a room is warm when someone has just left it. I did not open the door. I finished my rotation. I handed in my notice the following morning. The Marlowe Hotel reopened 14 months later. I drove past it once, last year. It looked good. New signage, window boxes, the kind of careful restoration that makes old things look loved. I didn't go in. I don't know what was in room 14. I know that whatever it was, it had been there long enough to make itself at home. Story 4. The last edit. Post-production work has its own rhythm at night. The building empties out by 7, 8 at the latest, and then it's just you and the hum of the servers and the blue glow of the monitors and the particular silence of a place designed to swallow sound. I liked it. I'm an introvert by nature, and the night shift suited me. The work was the same, the coffee was the same, and nobody stopped by your desk to ask how you were getting on. I'd been at the company 4 years, a mid-sized independent production company, 3 floors in a converted building, edit suites on the second floor, and the main open plan office on the third. I worked in post, logging footage, rough cuts, the unglamorous machinery of making television. The edit suites were numbered 1 to 6. Suite 4 was the one nobody liked. This sounds like I'm setting you up for something, and I suppose I am, but I want to be honest. At the time, I dismissed the reputation of Suite 4 entirely. It was a small, windowless room with a fast computer and a decent chair, and the idea that it was somehow different to the others struck me as the kind of folklore that accumulates in workplaces for no good reason. Someone had a bad experience once, told someone else, and now nobody wanted to book it. I booked it whenever it was free. The night it happened, I was working late on a deadline, a rough cut that needed to be ready for a 9 o'clock review. It was past midnight. I was the only person in the building. I knew this because the system logs entries and exits, and I had checked before I started, out of habit. I was in Suite 3, not 4. This matters. At around 12:45, I became aware of a sound from the room next door. Suite 4, the sound of a keyboard, someone typing, fast and continuous, the kind of sustained typing that means someone is working and not just composing an email. I stopped what I was doing and listened. It continued for perhaps 2 minutes. Then it stopped. Then the monitor in Suite 4. I could see the glow of it under the door, which I hadn't noticed before, went dark. I sat very still in Suite 3. After a moment, I got up and went to the door of Suite 4. The handle didn't move. Locked. Not just closed, but locked, which required a key that I didn't have and which was kept in the facilities office on the ground floor. I knocked. No response. I went downstairs, got the key, came back, unlocked the door. The suite was empty. The monitor was off. The keyboard undisturbed, the room cold in the way rooms go cold when the equipment hasn't been running. Except the edit software was open on the monitor. I know it was off. I'd seen it go dark through the gap under the door, but it was open, and on the timeline there was a new sequence. Footage I didn't recognize. Footage that wasn't from any project I was aware of. I sat down and looked at it. It was archive material, Old. The quality suggested the 80s or early 90s. A building I recognized after a moment as the building I was sitting in, before the conversion, whatever it had been before. Footage of empty corridors and rooms shot at night, I thought. The lighting was low and the windows were dark. The last clip on the timeline was different to the others. It was recent. I could tell by the quality, the sharpness of it. It was shot in the corridor outside the edit suites. The timestamp in the corner read that night's date. It showed me walking down the corridor toward Suite 4, stopping at the door, knocking, turning around and walking toward the stairs. I sat in that room for a long time. I saved the sequence to a drive, and I have it still. I've shown it to 3 people, all of whom have confirmed what I see on it. I never found out who made it. I never found a camera in that corridor, though I looked. I finished my cut. It was ready by 3. I left the building before 4, and I did not go back until there were other people in it. The company moved premises 2 years later. I was the only person in the office who wasn't sorry to go. Story 5. The reading room. I need you to understand what a library is like at night before I tell you what I experienced in one. During the day, it's a public place. People and movement and the shuffling, breathing, quiet life of a room full of humans doing human things. At night, when the last person has left and the doors have been locked and the lights have been dimmed to the low security setting, it becomes something else entirely. The books are still there. The shelves are still there. Everything is in its place. But the place is different when nobody's looking at it. I worked as a library technician for 6 years at a central branch. A Victorian building, high ceilings, original shelving in the older sections, the kind of building that was designed to make you feel small and quiet and appropriately reverent. I covered the occasional late shift when the evening staff couldn't make it, locking up, doing the final checks, making sure nobody had fallen asleep in the local history section, which happened more often than you'd think. The reading room was on the first floor. Original features, oak paneling, long tables, green-shaded lamps that were purely decorative now, replaced by overhead lighting. In the daytime, it was my favorite room in the building. At night, I avoided it when I could. I want to try to explain why, because it wasn't one single thing. It was the chairs. The reading room had 12 tables and 48 chairs. 48 identical chairs arranged in precise rows, the same every day because the cleaning staff straightened them every morning. When I did a late lockup, I would walk through the reading room as part of my final check, and the chairs were always straight, always aligned, always exactly as they should be, except on certain nights. On certain nights, I counted 9 over the course of 3 years. One chair would be pulled out from a table. Just one. Not dragged to a different position. Not knocked sideways. Pulled out carefully at a slight angle, the way you pull out a chair when you're about to sit down. I checked the CCTV the first time it happened. No one had been in the reading room since the last patron had left at 4 in the afternoon. The chair hadn't been pulled out when I'd done my 6 o'clock check. Between 6 and 9, while the library was empty and locked, something had pulled out a chair. The 9th time it happened, I sat down in the chair. I don't know why. It wasn't bravery, and I think it was more like an instinct. The sense that something had been inviting me for a long time and that refusing was its own kind of rudeness. I sat down at the table in the half dark of the security lighting, and I put my hands flat on the wood, and I waited. Nothing happened. The room was silent, but after a few minutes, I can't explain this, and I've never been able to explain it, and I've spent a lot of time trying. I felt very distinctly that there was someone sitting across the table from me. Not a sound, not a movement, not anything I could point to and say, there. Just a presence, the sense of being sat opposite to, of being in company. I sat there for 20 minutes. When I left, I pushed my chair back in. On my way out, I looked back at the table. The chair across from where I'd been sitting had been pushed back in too. I haven't worked a late shift in that building since, but I think about that table sometimes, about whatever it is that sits there in the half dark after everyone has gone home, about whether it's lonely, about whether on the nights when nobody comes, it still pulls out the chair. Story 6. Sublevel 2. I worked night security for a corporate office building for 2 years. Glass and steel, 9 floors above ground, 2 levels of underground car parking, 14,000 square meters of the kind of architecture that's designed to be impressive from a distance and characterless up close. During the day, it was full of people who dress well and walked quickly and looked through you in the way that people in expensive buildings sometimes do. At night, it was mine. I like that. I want to say it plainly because I think it matters to understanding what I did next and why, and what it cost me. I was comfortable in that building alone. I had done the job for long enough to know every floor, every corridor, every room that was left unlocked, and every room that wasn't. I was methodical, and I was calm, and I did not frighten easily. The car park was part of my rotation. Sublevel 1 and Sublevel 2 every 2 hours, checking for anything unusual. A car that shouldn't be there, a door that had been forced, anything that broke the pattern. I knew the pattern intimately. Sublevel 2 was always empty at night. A handful of reserved spaces for senior management, always vacated by 7 at the latest. I would walk it in under 10 minutes, down the ramp, along the row of spaces, back up the ramp, and it was always the same. Concrete and oil smell and the low buzz of the fluorescent lights and nothing else. On a Wednesday in November, I went down the ramp to Sublevel 2 and I kept going. I don't mean I fell. I mean the ramp continued. Past the point where it should have leveled out into the car park, the ramp kept descending. Another 10 meters, another 15, and then it flattened out and I was in a space I had never seen before. Sublevel 3, or something with no name at all. It was smaller than the levels above. 20 meters long perhaps, 12 wide. Empty. No parking bays marked, no spaces, no signage. The same concrete, the same smell, but the lights here were different. Older fittings, the yellow light of sodium bulbs rather than fluorescent, and several of them were dead. There was a door at the far end. Metal, industrial, no handle on this side, just a push plate, a sliver of light underneath it. Warm light again, the particular warmth of something that has been on for a long time. I want to be clear about my state of mind. I was not frightened, not yet. I was confused. I was certain of the layout of that building, certain that I had never been told about this level, certain it wasn't on the maps I'd been given in my induction. But confusion isn't fear. I walked to the door. I put my hand on the push plate, and from the other side of the door came a sound that I have thought about every day since. Voices, not loud, not distressed. The low murmur of a room full of people in conversation. The sound of an office during working hours, a meeting room, a canteen. The ordinary sound of people going about their work. At 2:45 in the morning, in a sub-level that didn't exist. I did not push the door open. I walked back to the ramp. I went up. I did the rest of my rotation on autopilot, logging nothing, saying nothing, functioning on the part of me that knew how to do the job, while the rest of me tried to reassemble into something coherent. In the morning, I looked at the building plans. 2 sub-levels, no third. I went back to the ramp the following night. It ended where it was supposed to. The flat concrete of Sublevel 2, the empty spaces, the fluorescent lights, no ramp, no door, no warm light underneath it. I have no explanation. I have only the sound of it, which I carry with me still. All those voices, calm and busy and utterly ordinary, going about their work in a room below the floor of the world. I wonder sometimes what they were working on. I wonder if any of them knew I was standing at the door. I wonder what would have happened if I'd pushed it open. I think, on balance, I made the right choice, but I'm not entirely sure. And that brings us to the end of tonight's tales. Thank you for listening to the Midnight Ledger, Bite Size. Don't forget, some things go bump in the night. Good night. Sleep tight. Mind the nightmares don't bite.